This is OwlUp, where learning happens in minutes, not hours. For a deeper journey, explore all our courses at owlup.co. Now, let's dive in. Welcome to Chapter 1 of How Experts Become Experts, where we're kicking things off by busting one of the biggest myths about mastery, that magical 10,000-hour number everyone loves to throw around. We'll dig into where this idea actually came from and why it might not be the golden ticket to expertise that people think it is. Let's get into it. You could train for fewer hours than Magnus Carlsen and still become world-class, or grind for decades and never get close. Today we're stepping into that uncomfortable gap between effort and results, where just work harder stops being an answer and real expertise actually begins. So where do those hours actually go when they do move the needle? They rarely look like the glossy highlight reels we see online. More often, they're hidden in ugly, awkward reps. The programmer rewriting the same function 10 ways to stress test edge cases. The UX designer running microtests on button copy that most users will never consciously notice. The security engineer replaying the same breach scenario until their response feels boringly automatic. In tech, especially, it isn't just more practice that matters. It's how precisely you collide with reality. Fast feedback loops, constraints that force trade-offs, and stakes high enough that errors actually hurt your pride, or your metrics, all change what each hour does to your skill. Two people can both practice for 3 years. One is mostly on autopilot. The other is systematically hunting discomfort. On paper, the hours match. Under the hood, the trajectories quietly diverge. In other words, 10,000 hours is a terrible GPS for your career. It tells you distance, not direction. Research on elite performers keeps finding the same uncomfortable pattern. Some people leapfrog to the top with far fewer hours, others stall despite grinding far longer. The difference isn't a secret hack. It's a different way of structuring those hours. In tech, that structure can mean deliberately chasing skills your current job doesn't demand yet, like a back-end dev learning product thinking, or working at intensities your calendar doesn't automatically create, the way a touring musician practices off stage, not just during shows. Here's the uncomfortable part research keeps hammering home. Time on task is noisy. How you use your attention inside that time is signal. The best performers don't just practice more. They practice in a way that leaves almost nowhere for their weaknesses to hide. Psychologist K. Anders Ericsson called this deliberate practice, and it has a very specific flavor. The work targets a clearly defined subskill that is just beyond your current comfort zone. The feedback is tight and often a little painful. And the goal is not to perform well now, but to change the system you use to perform in the future. In tech, that usually means zooming in far closer than feels natural. Instead of getting better at coding, you might spend a week only on naming and decomposition, reviewing tiny pull requests with a brutal eye for clarity. Instead of learning machine learning, you might obsess over a single failure mode in your model, say, how it behaves on rare but costly edge cases, and iteratively redesign both data and architecture until that failure shrinks. This is where individual differences stop being background noise. Two engineers can ship the same feature. One treats it as a checkbox, the other as a lab. The second person replays incidents, studies logs, benchmarks variance, asks for critique from someone better than them, and, crucially, writes down what they'll do differently next time. Same project, wildly different information density per hour. The research on games and music hints at why. In structured domains with clear scoreboards, deliberate practice explains a surprisingly large chunk of who rises. But when you shift into fuzzier arenas, like general professional success, the effect shrinks because the game itself is messier. For a software architect, that game now includes politics, timing, even luck. So in tech, the question quietly shifts from, am I working hard enough? To, is my daily work exposing me to the right kind of difficulty? The pros aren't simply logging hours. They're designing collisions with the specific problems their future self will need to solve. Consider two front-end devs both learning React. One clones tutorials, copy-pastes patterns, and feels productive as the repo count climbs. The other rebuilds the same small app 5 times, once with local state only, once with a global store, once with server components, once aggressively code split, once with strict performance budgets. They profile renders, swap libraries, and keep a running log of surprises. Same headline activity, completely different skill yield. Or take the staff engineer who stops treating incidents as mini crises and starts treating them as case studies. After each one, they reconstruct the decision tree. Which signals were ignored, which constraints were assumed, which alerts fired too late. Over months, that habit quietly upgrades their judgment in ways no generic years of experience ever could. Expertise is less time spent in the building, more how many times you've rewired the plumbing underneath it. Soon, your practice environment may matter as much as your manager. AI tutors will sit alongside you in code reviews, quietly flagging patterns in your decisions the way linters flag syntax. Hiring may shift from resume filters to live, personalized drills that map your learning curve like a fitness tracker. Your challenge this week? Notice one task you do on autopilot and redesign it as a micro-experiment with a clear hypothesis and a measurable before-after. Treat your growth like debugging an unfamiliar codebase. Stay curious, trace odd behaviors, and test small changes instead of rewriting everything at once. You're not chasing a magic number, you're mapping your own learning fingerprint. The interesting question isn't, how long will it take, but what experiment am I running next? Before next week, ask yourself, where in my current practice am I just logging hours, repeating what I'm already good at, instead of doing deliberate practice that actually stretches my weak spots? And what's one specific drill I could try today to target that weakness? If I had a coach watching me for 30 minutes in this skill, what exact feedback would I most hate to hear? And how can I simulate that honest critique right now? For example, filming myself, timing a rep, or comparing to an expert example. Looking at my week ahead, which 2 to 3 practice blocks can I upgrade from autopilot to deliberate practice by adding clear goals, immediate feedback, and a defined difficulty level that feels just outside my comfort zone? This was OwlUp, your daily step forward. To keep learning with structured courses and more insights, go to owlup.co. Until tomorrow!